Support for Connecticut East This Week comes from SCAD, the Southeastern Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, is offering a $3,500 sign-on bonus for licensed clinicians. Go to licensedclinicians.org to learn more. That's licensedclinicians.org. And Connecticut Council on Problem Gambling, here to help individuals and families affected by gambling-related harm. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit our website at ccpg.org. It's the final show for 2024, and we take a look back at some of the stories that hit the headlines this year. And this year we're doing it a little bit differently. Plus we take a look at other stories making the headlines from around the region. This is Connecticut East This Week. Hello, I'm Brian Scott Smith. It's the end of 2024 and it's been an eventful one. So many stories covered and 2025 already looking like another interesting news year. We're sort of breaking with tradition a bit this year, as although we're taking our usual look back at some of the stories that hit the headlines here in Connecticut, we've got some different voices giving their opinions this time around. Our state has a lot of veterans from the military, both young and old, and they do many different things to support our local communities. So joining me from the veteran-founded non-profit Opendoors Outdoors is the founder Davey Edwards, Sam Barrett, the chairman of the board, and new volunteer John Zivonic. To the three of you, welcome to Connecticut East This Week, the end of the year show. So we're going to be talking about a variety of things. We're going to round it all out by talking about Opendoors Outdoors, which of course, Davey, is your organization, and John and Sam, you are members. We're just going to talk around a few stories that happened here in Connecticut, how you feel about them, how maybe they affected you. The big thing that affects all of us, of course, here is electricity. And we've been hearing all these stories in the media over the past year or so, how expensive electricity is here in Connecticut, but also this push for clean energy as well. Sam, I'm going to start with you on this one because you actually belong to like a marketing public relations organization. And I know that you've done lots of presentations this year, and one of them was actually to do with energy. Talk to us a little bit about that, because I'm sure the price of electricity came up during that.
Yes, at Rebellion Group, where I work, I also produce an event series called Shaping CT's Future. And we talk about all of the topics, trends, and issues that are impacting businesses, folks that live here. We invited folks from the utilities as well as the state and the private sector to come in and speak to this issue because it's Connecticut's Achilles heel. And it's interesting because our energy is no different or better than Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New York, but we have the highest energy costs in the country, or at least we're in the top 5. And so we wanted to understand the state of play, how we got here, and then what are the implications and those consequences, both positive and negative. And it's looking at it through a critical lens, but also one that needs to be collaborative. And I think part of the issues that we have in Connecticut is the fact that the industry is comprised of so many different players, right? And you think about the number of agencies that are involved at the state level. There's a huge number of stakeholders involved, and those independent agencies all need to work together. And those independent agencies who all need to work together also need to work with the utilities. Then they also need to work with the organizations that are producing alternatives, right? And so that's looking at the green energy or greener energy alternatives. And there's no consensus as to whether this collaboration is actually happening, where it's going to have a tangible impact on the bottom line for people who live here. And the real world consequences that we're seeing is that it's a deterrent for families to either stay here or move here, which impacts the overall tax base. And it's a deterrent for businesses to set up shop, because if you're going to have energy costs that are going to inhibit or really prohibit the viability of your investment, then you're not going to stay here.
I want to bring in Davey and John just very quickly on this, because we've got a few other topics obviously we want to talk about. Davey, John, we're all consumers of electricity here in Connecticut. We all know how expensive it is. Any additional thoughts or comments based on what Sam said?
I think you have to break the bill down. So if we're talking about two things on the bill, if it's the delivery and the production, is that those are the two main factors on our energy bills in Connecticut? Is that correct? But now there's also an additional aspect to it now where they're adding things to catch up with people that didn't pay for their electricity bill. So from that standpoint, Opendoors Outdoors, we talk about beauty from the ashes. I was destitute. I couldn't pay my bills, and I capitalized on some of the services that were provided to me so I could put oil in my tank. So I look at it when I pay the bill and it's high, and I know that's what I'm paying a portion of. That's different for me because I've been there and I've benefited from it. But to Sam's point, I think you have to get it under control. So yeah, once a year, $200, whatever it is, I'm okay with that. The extent these giant bills every single month, I'm middle class. I'm definitely not lower middle class. I'm not upper middle class. I'm middle class. I'm legit middle class. And $240 a month, it doesn't seem right. But again, I don't mind doing a little extra to help people out. But again, it's got to get under control.
John, just some thoughts on the electricity. You run a business.
So for me, the electric, I'm in a unique situation. I live in Wallingford, Connecticut, and we have our own electric company. So I think we're very fortunate because our prices are significantly lower than others. And I actually ended up here about 15 years ago because the company I was working for moved 3 companies together in Wallingford. I ended up down here because of that. And for manufacturing companies, especially, there's a huge incentive to go to Wallingford because the electric is so cheap. And I don't know what others are paying, but when I brought it up in conversation over the dinner table, I seem to be significantly lower. And just for an example, I lived in an apartment for 2 years when I was getting ready to buy my house, and it was in Wallingford, and running the heat 69, 70 degrees, which was electric baseboard heat, and keeping the air conditioning probably 66 the entire summer. I think twice in the year, my bill hit $200. That was the highest it ever hit. And I was running everything constantly. So I think that's one of the things where we're very fortunate in Wallingford. And I don't know enough about the topic to know why other towns can't do that. But I know Wallingford is a small town. They've had their own electric company forever. I physically pay with a check. They've found ways to keep the costs down. Something like that may sound simple, paying with a check instead of having, I think they've changed that recently. They've moved to get somebody in charge of technology, but you keep things simple, like physically paying with a check instead of having to have an expensive computer system to run everything. There are ways to cut back on costs. I think we've grown as technology dependent, and I think that makes things more difficult, and maybe it's easier, but Wallingford figured out a way to keep the costs down, and I think maybe others could look into that and make it more competitive.
I want to move on to another topic. Earlier this year, if you followed the Yukon Huskies, Dan Hurley, lots of media attention around Dan, the coach, turned down the Los Angeles Lakers as like a huge, great big contract, has stayed with Yukon. But that said, he's still getting huge amounts of compensation. David, I'll go to you on this. What are your thoughts about this massive, great big contract? Because I think people look at this and go, that's great, but does he need all that money?
I played basketball for Glassmore High School, and then I had the opportunity to sit varsity at Eastern Connecticut State University in Willimantic, and UConn was right up the street. And UConn basketball does something very special in Connecticut. It really has a profound impact on the community by bringing people together that wouldn't be together. And people love the basketball, girls and men and women. They go, they love it. And I think you can't put a price tag on what UConn basketball has done for the state and its people and the talent that it draws from all over the country for many years now. When I was in college, so that's 30 years ago, UConn was a powerhouse then. And you take something that's very good, I don't know you can put a price tag on it. And to talk about what a man makes, and that started way back when with Calhoun. And I remember I think he was making $1 million and people were freaking out. But he can look at it and say, but look what I've done for the school, for the state. So yes, I don't talk too much about what men make, but I think I don't see anything negative coming from what's happening over there.
And John, you were saying that although you don't watch sports on television, but your daughter is interested in basketball. Just tell us a little bit about that, because that was a nice story. And I'm guessing seeing, obviously, our basketball successes here in Connecticut, be it the male or female teams, obviously helps to promote that type of thing to young girls and young men.
I'm a huge sports person. I was a personal trainer for 10 years, and I actually got to play basketball every single day. We had a hoop in the parking lot, and I taught tons of people to play basketball. So I love the sport itself. And we've been trying my daughter out with different things. She did karate for a while, and then she tried softball. So this year she mentioned basketball. So I'm giving up my fire pit to make room for a basketball hoop. And I reached out to my parents and asked if they'd want to buy my daughter a basketball hoop for Christmas. So we got her an adjustable one. She loves it and stays with it. Then we'll get a bigger one. But I'm excited just to play with my wife and daughter in my driveway. As far as the salaries, it's tough because I know when you're the best at what you do, you can command a high salary. But you take someone like me, and the only live sporting events I've been to in the past few years was with Opendoors. We go once a year to watch the Hartford Stadium, what is it, the Yard Goats, and we watch the baseball game. But they've just priced people like me from being able to take my family to do that. The last professional sports game I went to, one of my bosses had season tickets and sold me a couple tickets. I took my grandfather and my uncles to watch the Yankees in the new stadium. But the price has gotten so high on tickets that someone like me can't afford to go to a game. So I do go to a lot of local level stuff, high school or college, if someone invites me to a game, because it feels like I can support that and it's not too much of a financial strain. But for me to have to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars to watch a professional game, it's tough. We actually went to see the Globetrotters and she loved it, but it was a reasonable ticket price. And what I don't know if people consider when they're taking the salaries, what it's doing to their fan base who are getting them that salary. And that's really my only thing is, if you want the people that supported you to be able to support, you have to make it available for them to watch the sport, not just on TV.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair comment. Sam, I'm going to change the subject and turn to you on this one. All of you are veterans. Sam, of course, you are former US Army. John, also former US Army, and Davey, former US Marine. Perception of veterans these days. Things seem to go in cycles. What's the perception of veterans, do you feel, Sam, these days?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So I think I'm the only veteran that works at my marketing agency. And I still think there's a massive disconnect or a massive knowledge gap of what people think a veteran is and isn't. And it's weird because it's almost like you want to try and people like to organize things into boxes sometimes, right? So it's easily identified and easily understood. I think that's just part of human nature. The military community is so incredibly diverse, and we're all just people with different feelings, emotions, like anybody else. And so it's people have this assumption of what a veteran is, and they may tread lightly or think that we're somehow damaged or we're all like need fixing or help or whatever it is. So anyways, long-winded way of saying people still don't understand how to approach veterans sometimes, or how to think of veterans from an identity point of view, maybe.
Davey, thoughts as well. What have you come across from maybe people, society in general, when it comes to veterans? And is it getting better or not?
Right now, I think the veteran card has been played out to a point. I think that people were 100% behind our veterans as a group to care about. Not that they don't appreciate veterans, but to care about. And I think it's starting to move in another direction, not as much towards veterans, but other things that are equally as important. People's food, clothing, shelter. Veteran was such an easy target to donate to give to care about. And I think what happens is every 3 to 5 years, I think people find something else to care about. And that's just not my thought. That's actually documented. You can count on giving from a certain group for 3 to 5 years, and then they're going to switch. Some companies will intentionally say, listen, we're going to give to you 3 years in a row. Then we're going to take a year off. Then we'll revisit it. And so it's not just what I feel. I think it's a legitimate a way that people feel. But I will say this is that civilians that come from a military family have a giant heart for veterans. Civilians that did not come from a family of veterans don't feel the same way towards the veteran population. Even if you're not a veteran, if you came from that veteran family, if that father served, if that mother served, I do see in some cases that for the veteran group, as a group to care about is much greater. So it's out there. People, we love our veterans and we know what they did. But like Sam said, it's sometimes people just don't know what to do with a veteran. Some of us need help. Some of us don't. It's just like law enforcement or first responders. Everyone has career that, or a place in our community that they face challenges. And so I think that the scope of service, people that provide a service is growing within our population to where it's not just veterans. I think they're starting to see a broader picture of people that are actually serving the population.
We're running out of time, so we're going to turn to your organization, Davey, Opendoors Outdoors. Before I come back to you, I want to bring John in on this because John is one of your most recent new members. John, explain to us how you got involved with Opendoors Outdoors.
So I was looking about 2 years ago for something to get involved with greater than myself. I was doing my handyman business for a few years, and after doing that, I wasn't involved with much community outreach. When I was a personal trainer for a decade, I worked at a YMCA, and I was very involved in a lot of fundraising things as far as like cancer, different organizations. I would always find my weekends filled with doing some sort of fundraising or giving back. And when I started the handyman business, I just wasn't in that circle anymore. I didn't find a way of giving back. So I was talking with my wife, just working alone most days, about either becoming a volunteer firefighter or finding some sort of organization that I could give back to so I could feel more connected with other people. And like a lot of people, they've had tough times in their life. I had overcome tough times, and I felt like I was in a position where I could, give back and help out. And my stepfather is the public policy director for NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And he reads the newspaper every day, and he opened up the paper, and on the front page of the Hartford Courant was Opendoors Outdoors. So he sent me the article and said, "Hey, John, you've been talking for a while about looking to get involved with some community service. Why don't you reach out to these guys?" So I read the article and I'm like, wow, veterans and hiking, and this sounds pretty awesome. So I just emailed admin at Opendoors Outdoors and got an email back and said, "Hey, let's find a time to chat." And Davey called me up and we ended up on the phone for about half an hour. I, told him my story. He told me his, and he said that he was getting ready to go up to the White Mountains to do some snowshoeing, and he'd give me a call when he got back. And I just said, "Hey, if you're going up to the Whites to go snowshoeing, can I jump on board with you guys?" And he said, "Let me talk to the guys and see what they say." And I got a, text like 15 minutes later, "Hey, you're in." And the next thing I knew, it was in a commuter lot at 3 a.m. with a bunch of veterans getting ready to go snowshoeing in the White Mountains. And that was it. I was so hooked. And the thing is with Opendoors Outdoors that I like the most is whenever I've been part of an organization, I've always felt like I was in it, but I was on the outside, if that makes sense. I was, hey, they're letting me be part of this, but I'm not necessarily one of the guys. And once I joined Opendoors Outdoors, from day one, I felt like I was not only part of the group, but I was one of the guys. And that was really cool because I hadn't connected to any military guys since my time in service around 2000, 2001. And this was my first time actually hanging out. And I realized that we had a lot of similarities in our conversations and just views on the world or whatever. And I was like, wow, this is my group. And since being part of Opendoors, Davey has connected me to a lot of other veterans organizations and things that I had not been a part of or even knew existed prior to.
David, let's turn to you. Great words there from John, which obviously says a huge amount, not only about yourself, and I know you're quite a humble individual, but also obviously the team and the volunteers that form Opendoors Outdoors. We spoke to you earlier this year. That's how we got introduced to you, found out all about your organization, the amazing stuff that you do. Since we spoke to you, just give us a quick few heads up on some of the stuff that's actually happened. I know that you were looking to get, I think, a replacement truck. That happened, didn't it?
Yeah, we had our truck, our F-150 2019. We had 175,000 miles on it and put the call out. We needed a new truck, but we put the call out and we had some fantastic people step up. A company like Elgin, based out of Windsor, Connecticut, veteran run company. The president's a veteran. and they hire veterans, and they're an amazing group. We actually met them through Sam and his business, and they stepped up with a beautiful donation, and some people stepped up. So yeah, so we were able to get a new truck, but vehicles to us are very important because we do want to provide transportation just in case someone can't get to where they're going.
And this is what I love about your organization is it's for everybody of all able and not quite so able, and you've got those vehicles there. Sam, I'm going to give you the last word because we're almost out of time, sadly. Just for anybody listening who might be interested, in getting involved with Opendoors Outdoors, what's your message to them?
There is still value in doing something bigger than yourself, right? And I think that's the reason why John's here, the reason why I'm here, and obviously Davey, why he started it. And I would say that for anybody that wants to get involved as a volunteer or as a participant in our program, like what we do well, I think, is blend fun and functionality. Come and see what we're about, be part of our events, be part of our hikes, see what avenues of approach we can provide in order for you to make a difference in not a huge way. It's like small changes, ounces equal pounds, and you're going to have lots of fun and make big changes by doing small things.
And also reconnecting with good people as well. I just wanted to say to you, Davey Edwards, founder of Opendoors Outdoors, Sam Barrett, and also John Zvonik, thanks ever so much for being on the podcast, giving us your views on some of those stories. Have yourselves a very Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and of course, a happy new year. And congratulations to all of you for the hard work you do with Opendoors Outdoors.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
And if you're interested in getting involved with Opendoors Outdoors, then visit their website at opendoorsoutdoors, all one word.org. Sam Barrett and the Rebellion Group can be found at simply rebelliongroup.com. And John Zvonik, the mountain man, not your average handyman, can be found on social media and Facebook at Mountain Man the Helping Hand. Connecticut East This Week is made possible by
SCAD, the Southeastern Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, is looking for licensed clinicians and is offering the top benefits packages in the state. Go to licensedclinicians.org to learn more. That's licensedclinicians.org.
The Connecticut Council on Problem Gambling is a nonprofit organization which, through advocacy, prevention, and education, is here to support individuals and families who are impacted by problem gambling. Our helpline, 1-888-789-7777, is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We also have live chat and tech support through our website, www.ccpg.org.
Time now for a look at other stories making the headlines this week. U.S. Senator Richard Blumenthal, who chairs the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations currently, released a new report on the U.S. Coast Guard's cover-up of their Operation Fouled Anchor report. In 2023, the news organization CNN leaked the report, which showed the agency had failed to properly investigate years of sexual assault and misconduct at the Coast Guard Academy in New London, Connecticut. Blumenthal said the new report and their further investigations showed the Coast Guard leadership deliberately withheld the report.
Today's report confirms and provides additional powerful evidence that the cover-up of sexual assault in the Coast Guard was deliberate and purposeful and longstanding. The Fouled Anchor report was concealed from Congress by an explicit decision by the leadership of the Coast Guard in 2018.
It comes just weeks after the former commandant of the Coast Guard, Admiral Carl Schultz, appeared on CNN saying he had deliberately chosen to withhold the report from Congress and the public back in 2018. Blumenthal said Schultz's reasons, though, for his actions were flawed.
Admiral Schultz's explanation given recently on CNN that he was seeking to protect the anonymity and privacy of the survivors is contradicted by some of the circumstantial evidence. His predecessor, Admiral Zunkoff, was preparing to release information about this investigation, Fouled Anchor. Survivors were ready to come forward, as they have done.
Blumenthal said the subcommittee's investigations into Operation Fouled Anchor will continue when the new Congress starts next year, and although he couldn't say if prosecutions would occur for those involved, said there were other measures that could be taken to hold individuals accountable. Blumenthal said the withholding of the report by the Coast Guard leadership was a clear attempt to protect themselves and the reputation of the Coast Guard, and not those who had suffered. Connecticut's controversial state pier in the city of New London could cost the state millions more after two major floor flaws were detected. The facility, which is being used as a hub for the offshore wind industry, has identified a problem with a retaining wall and transportation corridor at the south end of the pier, as well as a tow wall on the eastern side of the pier. Paul Whitescarver is the chairman of the Connecticut Port Authority, who are responsible for the project, and says the tow wall is a design flaw that needs to be rectified.
It's not exactly perfectly vertical. Down towards the bottom where the mud line is, it actually comes in a little. There's a spec that the engineers put in place to prevent any ship that comes in during heavy weather that might kind of rock. It might hit the bottom wall, so to speak. So that distance isn't what it's supposed to be. So we've determined that after it was completed, and we've asked Kiewit for solutions.
The Port Authority say they are in talks with their construction company Kiewit, who built large portions of the pier, but no agreement has been reached as to who will foot the cost for rectifying the problems. Whitescarver says they've known about these issues for a while.
The engineers keep going back and forth what the engineering solution is, and then to agree on what that cost looks like. The CPA's position is, look, because you are the construction manager at risk, at some point in time, you agreed to a guaranteed maximum price. That's the price that we're going to pay. So any additional cost is on the construction manager, which would be Kiewit.
Construction firm Kiewit were responsible for obtaining bids from companies for developing State Pier and also, controversially, bidding and winning millions of dollars of contracts for the project themselves. Connecticut East This Week reached out to Kiewit for comment about the State Pier situation, but has so far received no reply. The Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, or DEEP, announced recently it has selected new clean energy projects for the state that will help generate 580 megawatts of electricity and 200 megawatts of new electric storage capacity. The new projects come at a time when Connecticut has recently backed away from further offshore wind projects with neighboring states Rhode Island and Massachusetts. Governor Lamont acknowledged the offshore wind projects already being constructed and said the state is looking at a variety of options to help with electricity prices.
State right now that's building out Revolution Wind, that's going to turn on in about a year and a half. We've contracted for solar coming down from Maine. We're looking at the nuclear deal as well. We're doing a group purchase of onshore wind out of Maine. We'll be able to load that up. So every state has got different priorities about how we increase capacity, which is how ultimately we're going to bring down the cost of electricity and do it in as green a way as we can.
Katie Dykes is the commissioner of DEEP and said the state has other priorities in clean energy solutions beyond just offshore wind.
This year, what we saw rise to the top were the solar and storage projects, but we're still very committed to offshore wind. We know that we're going to need all these different energy supply resources in order to support our growing economy, and we're going to continue to be working with Massachusetts and Rhode Island and the other New England states. The governor referred to a procurement that we're initiating that all 6 New England states are participating in for transmission that could unlock low-cost onshore wind up in Maine.
The new energy projects include 3 solar farms, 1 in Connecticut and 2 others in Maine, and Connecticut's first grid-scale energy storage facility, which would be one of the largest in New England. And finally, of course, Happy New Year to all our listeners wherever you are, and we will be back in 2025. That's all from us for this edition. Do send us your questions and story ideas to the show via our website at connecticut-east.com or Facebook or Twitter at Connecticut East and on Instagram at Connecticut East This Week. And you can listen to the show again on our social platforms, on demand, and by asking your smart speaker to play Connecticut East This Week podcast. And please like, follow, and share on your social media too. I'm Brian Scott Smith. Thank you for listening.